Welcome back to Secrets Exposed. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. You're the reason these stories worth sharing. Tell us where you're watching from, city or country. We're amazed by how far these tales reach. To get daily new and amazing stories for you, subscribe our channel and press bell icon. All right, let's begin. The sky was still dark when Alexander Ward's boots touched the familiar pavement of his street. Months of desert sand still clung to his uniform, his shoulders still heavy with the weight of battles fought far from home. He had imagined this moment countless times while overseas, walking back into his house, hearing his wife's laugh, feeling his son's arms wrap around him. But as he pushed open the front door, the house greeted him not with warmth, but with silence. Not the calm, comforting silence of sleep. This was different. It pressed against his ears like a warning. The kind of silence soldiers knew, the kind that came just before something went wrong. Alexander set down his duffel bag quietly, scanning the darkened living room. Everything looked normal. The couch draped with a throw blanket, the family photos still framed on the wall, the faint scent of lavender from the candle Elena always burned at night. Normal. Too normal. Then he heard it. A sound so faint he thought at first it was his imagination. A muffled cry. Thin, broken, like a child trying to scream through cloth. Alexander's heart seized. He stilled completely, his training kicking in. His ears strained. There was again a whimper, desperate, buried beneath the floorboards. The basement. Without a sound, he reached for the pistol strapped under his jacket. His hands moved by instinct, steady, practiced, but his chest tightened with dread. He had survived ambushes, gunfire, explosions. Nothing had ever made his body tremble the way that sounded now. Jacob, his son, he crept toward the basement door. The hinges groaned softly as he turned the knob, pushing it open with care. Cold air drifted upward, carrying with it the smell of damp concrete. And something else. Something sour. Sweat, fear, something alive. The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended, one slow step at a time. He kept his pistol raised, muzzle pointed downward, his breathing shallow. The cries grew clearer. Short, gasping, panicked. At the bottom of the stairs, Alexander turned the corner and froze. The basement, dimly lit by a single hanging bulb, looked like a stage set for a nightmare. In the center of the room sat Jacob, his 10-year-old boy, strapped tightly to a wooden chair. Duct tape bound his wrists and ankles, his small frame trembling violently. A strip of cloth gagged his mouth, muffling his sobs. His eyes were wide, brimming with tears, darting around in frantic terror. Just a few feet away stood a phone on a tripod, its camera pointed directly at the boy. The small red light blinked steadily, mercilessly. Recording. No, live streaming. Alexander's pulse thundered in his ears. His grip on the pistol tightened. But the horror didn't end there. Because standing beside the camera, relaxed as though this was some twisted performance, was Ryan. His younger brother. Ryan's grin was wide, sharp, his eyes glinting with sick excitement. He leaned casually against the tripod, watching Jacob struggle, feeding on the boy's fear like it was entertainment. For a split second, Alexander's mind refused to process it. His own brother. His blood. Then, from the corner of the room, came a voice. Low. Calm. Familiar. Don't stop him. Alexander turned his head slowly. There stood Elena, his wife. Her silk robe hung loosely around her shoulders, her arms folded, her face unreadable. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't rushing to free her son. She was watching. Watching, as though she had known all along. Alexander's throat went dry. His mind roared with disbelief. Elena, he whispered, his voice shaking. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw no fear, no shame, only cold finality. Don't stop him, she repeated. The words sliced through him like shrapnel. His pistol raised almost on its own, the weight of it heavy in his hands. His training demanded action. His heart demanded answers. And in that basement, between the blinking red light and his son's muffled cries, Alexander felt his world collapse in silence. The silence in the basement pressed down like a weight. The only sound was Jacob's muffled sobs, each one tearing deeper into Alexander's chest. His pistol remained raised, the barrel steady though his hands trembled inside. Ryan tilted his head, that twisted grin still plastered across his face. Well, he drawled, his voice slick with mockery. The great Captain Ward returns home early. What a surprise. You just walked into my premiere. The words barely registered. Alexander's gaze locked on Jacob, who writhed helplessly against the tape. His son's terrified eyes pleaded with him, begging to be freed. Alexander's voice broke the silence, low and sharp. Untie him. Now. Ryan chuckled, a deep, taunting laugh that reverberated off the basement walls. Oh, brother, you really don't understand, do you? He gestured casually toward the tripod. This isn't just for me. We have an audience. They're watching right now, cheering, paying. You think I just stopped because you walked in? Alexander's stomach turned. His finger flexed against the trigger. You put my son on display for strangers? Ryan's eyes glimmered with cruel delight. Not strangers. Customers. You'd be surprised what people will pay to see, Alex. Fear sells better than anything. Jacob whimpered louder, his body convulsing in panic as tears streamed down his cheeks. Alexander's chest burned. He wanted to end this. He wanted to put a bullet straight through the smirk on his brother's face. But then his eyes shifted to Elena. She hadn't moved from her spot in the corner. Her arms were still folded, her expression cold, detached. The woman he thought he knew, the wife he had trusted with his son's life while he served overseas, was standing silent as their child was humiliated and tortured in front of her. Elena, Alexander's voice cracked. How could you let this happen? Her gaze didn't waver. You don't understand, she said quietly. Her tone was steady, almost rehearsed. It's bigger than us. Bigger than family. Alexander's heart clenched. He's your son. For the first time, Elena's lips twitched. Not with guilt, with irritation. Do you think love pays bills, Alex? Do you think medals feed a child? Ryan, he showed me a way out. A way we could finally live without scraping by. Alexander's grip on his pistol tightened, the metal biting into his palm. His mind swirled with disbelief and fury. His brother was exploiting his son. His wife was defending it. His home, the place he had fought to protect, was now a stage for cruelty. Ryan leaned closer to Jacob, resting a hand on the boy's trembling shoulder. See, Alex, this is the world you came home to. You're not the hero here. You're the outsider. You don't belong anymore. Jacob flinched under Ryan's touch, muffled cries turning frantic. Alexander's chest heaved, a storm of rage boiling within. Take your hand off him, Alexander growled. Ryan only smirked, his fingers tightening. Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of your boy? Go on, big brother. Be the soldier. Let him see who you really are. For a moment, the room seemed to freeze. Alexander's breath caught, his mind racing. He had stared down armed men, terrorists, soldiers who wanted him dead. But this, his own brother, his own wife, this was something his training had never prepared him for. The red light on the phone blinked steadily, taunting him. A constant reminder that every second of this nightmare was being broadcast to faceless watchers. Alexander inhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing. He shifted his pistol, just slightly, lowering it away from Ryan's chest. His finger hovered, tense. Ryan's smirk widened, mistaking the move for weakness. But Alexander's aim wasn't at his brother anymore. It was at the camera. A single shot thundered through the basement, the echo cracking against the walls. The phone exploded into sparks, collapsing onto the floor. The blinking red light went dark. The live stream was over. For the first time, Ryan's smirk faltered. His eyes narrowed, fury flaring. You idiot, he spat. Do you know what you just done? Elena gasped, her cold composure breaking into panic. Alex, no. Do you have any idea how much? She stopped herself, biting her lip, but it was too late. Her words hung in the air like poison. Alexander's voice cut through, steady and filled with rage. You were making money off this? Elena's silence was answer enough. Ryan's face twisted into rage. He stepped forward, his body tense, dangerous. You ruined everything. They were watching. They were paying. You think this ends just because you pulled the plug? Alexander leveled his pistol again, his voice cold as steel. Untie him. Now. The air between them crackled with violence. Jacob's sobs filled the silence, his small frame trembling against the restraints. And for the first time that morning, Alexander realized this wasn't just about saving his son. It was about facing the truth. His brother was a predator, and his wife was no longer his ally. The real battle had just begun. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the basement after the shot. Smoke curled from a shattered phone on the floor, its broken lens staring blankly upward like a dead eye. For the first time since Alexander walked into the room, silence replaced the mocking hum of the live stream. Jacob whimpered against his gag, his small body shaking uncontrollably in the chair. His eyes darted from his father to Ryan, then to Elena, searching for hope, terrified of betrayal. Ryan's smirk had curdled into something darker. His jaw tightened, veins standing out along his neck. You think you could just waltz in here, play the hero, and shut it down? His voice dropped, low and venomous. You've ruined everything. Alexander kept his pistol trained on him, though his chest heaved with restrained fury. Everything. His voice cracked like a whip. You tied up a 10-year-old boy. My son. Your nephew. And you call that everything. Ryan's lips twitched, a cruel smile flickering back to life. Don't act so righteous. You think the world outside these walls cares about your medals? Your sacrifices? Out there, you're just another broken soldier. But here, he gestured around the basement, at Jacob, at the broken phone. Here I was building something real. People crave this. They pay for it. And Elena, stop, Alexander barked, his pistol jerking upward in warning. Elena flinched at his tone, but didn't back down. She stepped forward, her robe trailing across the cold concrete. No, Alex. Let him finish. You need to hear it. Alexander's eyes narrowed, his chest tightening. I've heard enough. But Elena's voice was calm, deliberate. You don't get it, do you? I was alone here while you were gone. Months. Years. Bills piling up. Promises breaking. Do you know how hard it was to keep everything together while you were out there playing soldier? Her words dug deep, twisting into old wounds. But Alexander's fury burned hotter. So you let him do this? To our son. Her eyes hardened. I chose survival. Ryan offered stability, money, power. And people, they're sick, Alex. They'll pay anything to watch pain. Why shouldn't it be someone else's pain for once? Alexander stared at her, disbelief flooding him. His wife, the woman he trusted, the mother of his child, wasn't ashamed. She was justifying it. Jacob let out a strangled cry, shaking his head violently, desperate for someone to see him, to save him. Alexander's vision blurred red. He took a step closer, his pistol leveled at Ryan's chest. Let him go. Last warning. Ryan chuckled, low and taunting. Or what? You'll kill me? In front of him. He tapped Jacob's trembling shoulder, leaning close to whisper something into the boy's ear. Jacob flinched, tears spilling faster. Ryan looked back at Alexander, grinning wider. Go on. Pull the trigger. Show your son who you really are. That was it. The final push. Alexander surged forward, grabbing Ryan by the collar with his free hand, slamming him hard against the basement wall. The pistol pressed into his brother's chest, the steel digging in a bone. Ryan gasped, but the grin never fully disappeared. Elena stepped forward quickly, panic flashing for the first time. Alex, don't. You'll ruin everything. Her words sliced deeper than Ryan's grin. Not save Jacob. Not stop this madness. Just ruin everything. Ryan hissed through clenched teeth, his eyes wild. Do it, brother. You've killed men before. With one more. Alexander's grip trembled. For a fleeting second, flashes of war erupted in his mind. Ambushes, gunfire, enemies falling beneath his weapon. But those men had been strangers. Combatants. This was different. This was blood. Jacob whimpered again, his wide eyes locked on his father. His small chest rose and fell rapidly, his whole body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Alexander's heart fractured. He couldn't let his son see him pull the trigger. Not like this. Instead, with a guttural roar, Alexander shoved Ryan off the wall and across the basement floor. Ryan stumbled, hitting the ground hard. The pistol stayed raised, steady, as Alexander stood over him. "Untie him," Alexander ordered, his voice shaking with rage. Ryan spat blood from his split lip, chuckling as he pushed himself up to one knee. "You think this ends here? That was just one stream. There are backups. People waiting. You can't stop it. You can't stop me." Alexander's pulse thundered. He wanted to silence that voice forever. But before he could act, Jacob gave a muffled scream, thrashing harder against the restraints. His eyes darted toward the tripod, and Alexander followed his gaze. Another device. A second phone, hidden on a shelf in the shadows. Still blinking red. Still streaming. Alexander's blood ran cold. The live stream wasn't over. The blinking red light glared at Alexander from the shelf like a living thing, mocking him. Another phone. Another feed. His stomach turned as realization sank in. The first shot hadn't ended it. The world was still watching. His son's terror, his family's betrayal, his own rage, all of it was being broadcast to faceless strangers who thrived on pain. Jacob's muffled scream tore through the silence again, his eyes begging his father to understand. Alexander spun, firing a precise shot. The second phone shattered, sparks raining onto the concrete. For a moment, relief washed over him. But then Ryan's laughter cut through, low and guttural. "You think it's that simple?" Ryan sneered, wiping blood from his lip as he staggered to his feet. "There are backups everywhere. Multiple feeds, multiple angles. Every second of this is out there, and you can't erase it." Alexander's chest heaved, fury and dread battling within him. He tightened his grip on the pistol, pointing it at his brother's head. "Where?" Ryan grinned wider, even as his face dripped crimson. "Wouldn't you like to know?" Before Alexander could move, Elena's voice cut in. "Stop!" She rushed forward, stepping between the brothers, her robe sweeping across the floor. Her eyes were frantic, desperate. For a split second, Alexander thought he saw guilt, but no. It was something else. Fear. Not fear for Jacob. Not fear for Ryan. Fear for the system collapsing around her. "Elena," Alexander growled, his voice breaking. "Tell me the truth. How long has this been happening?" She froze, lips trembling. For a moment, the mask slipped, and Alexander saw the weight of her choices press against her. Then, she straightened her shoulders, voice steady once more. 3 months, she whispered. "Since you left." The words stabbed him deeper than any blade. 3 months. 3 months of betrayal. 3 months of Jacob living in a nightmare while he fought a war oceans away. Alexander's throat tightened while rising. "You let this happen to him? Our son." Her jaw clenched. "You don't understand, Alex. The money. Money." Alexander's roar shook the basement. "He's a child. He's our child." Jacob flinched at the outburst, his sobs intensifying. Alexander quickly forced his tone lower, turning back toward his son. "It's okay, buddy. I've got you." But Ryan wasn't done. He stepped forward, his voice laced with venom. "You see, Alex? She's not your wife anymore. She's mine. She made her choice. And you," he jabbed a finger at Alexander, his grin manic. "You're just a relic. A ghost of a soldier who doesn't matter anymore." The words struck like bullets, but Alexander held his ground. He raised the pistol higher, the barrel now locked directly between Ryan's eyes. His finger twitched against the trigger. And then Jacob made a sound, a muffled whimper that cut through the rage. Alexander froze, his eyes flicking to his son. Jacob was trembling, his small body rigid with fear. His gaze wasn't on Ryan. It wasn't on Elena. It was on him, his father, holding the gun. Alexander's chest cracked open with anguish. His son wasn't seeing a savior. He was seeing another weapon, another threat. Slowly, Alexander lowered the pistol. Ryan laughed, triumphant. "That's right, big brother. You don't have it in you. Not anymore." But the laugh died quickly as Alexander lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into Ryan's chest, driving him back into the wall. The pistol clattered to the floor, but Alexander didn't need it. His fist did the talking. Years of pent-up rage, betrayal, and heartbreak fueled each strike. Ryan fought back, wild and vicious, but Alexander's training gave him the edge. He pinned his brother to the wall, one forearm pressed hard against his throat. Ryan gagged, gasping for air, but the fire in his eyes burned on. "Where are the backups?" Alexander snarled. Ryan coughed, blood staining his teeth. He chuckled through the pain. "Everywhere. Cloud storage. Multiple servers. Even if you kill me, Alex, it's already out there." Elena's voice rang out again, desperate. "Alex, stop. Don't make this worse." Alexander turned his head slowly, his eyes locking on her. "Worse? He's torturing our son. And you." His voice cracked with grief. "You stood there and let it happen." For the first time, Elena's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to stop it. I thought maybe Jacob would be safe if we controlled it, if we chose what they saw." Alexander's stomach dropped. Her words weren't an excuse. They were a confession. She hadn't just allowed it. She had managed it, organized it. Ryan wheezed a laugh, his voice hoarse under Alexander's grip. "Told you, brother. She's in this as deep as me." The world tilted beneath Alexander's feet. The betrayal wasn't divided. It was united. His brother and his wife, both complicit, both architects of his son's suffering. His grip tightened, fury surging. For a moment, he wanted to end Ryan then and there. But Jacob's whimper echoed again, pulling him back from the edge. Alexander released Ryan, letting him collapse to the floor in a heap. He grabbed his pistol, then turned to Jacob, quickly cutting the tape from his wrists and ankles. The boy fell into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Alexander held him tight, his heart shattering. But as he clutched his son, his eyes locked on Elena. Her tears were flowing freely now, but there was no comfort in them. Only guilt, only fear. The truth had been revealed, but it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Because Alexander now knew the full depth of betrayal, and he wasn't sure if he could survive it. Jacob clung to Alexander's chest, his sobs muffled against the soldier's uniform. The boy's tiny fists gripped tight, refusing to let go, as if he feared that if he loosened even for a second, he would be dragged back into the chair. Alexander held him firmly, his palm cradling the back of Jacob's head. "You're safe," he whispered, though the words felt fragile, like glass shattering even as they left his lips. Safe was a lie. Nothing about this was safe. The basement felt smaller now, its concrete walls closing in. Elena stood frozen a few feet away, her tear-streaked face pale, her robe slipping off one shoulder. Ryan sat slumped against the wall, coughing, blood dripping from his split lip, yet his grin still lingered, faint but poisonous. Alexander's voice cut through the thick silence. "We're leaving. Now." He tried to lift Jacob higher, balancing the boy on his hip, his other hand tightening around the pistol. But as he stepped toward the stairs, Elena moved quickly, blocking his path. "You can't," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Alexander's eyes blazed. "Move, Elena." Her chin lifted. "You don't understand. If you take him out of here, they'll come for us. For him. For all of us. The people watching, they're not just random strangers. They're powerful. They'll want revenge." Jacob whimpered, his small arms tightening around his father's neck. Alexander's stomach churned at the words. Revenge. Powerful. It meant this was bigger than just Ryan's twisted idea. This was organized. Structured. A system. "Then I'll face them," Alexander growled. "But Jacob's coming with me." Ryan's voice rasped from the corner, weak but mocking. "You think you could just walk away, Alex? That kid's already theirs. His face is on a dozen screens across the world. Do you know what they pay for a repeat performance?" Alexander snapped, his pistol swinging back toward his brother. "Shut up." His roar filled the basement, making Jacob flinch against his chest. Elena raised her hands quickly, her eyes wide. "Please, Alex, listen to me. Killing Ryan won't fix this. You'll only make it worse." Alexander's jaw clenched. He wanted to pull the trigger, to end Ryan's smirk once and for all. But Jacob's small body trembled against his, grounding him, reminding him what truly mattered. With a steady breath, he turned back toward the stairs. "We're done here. He stepped forward again, but Elena's hand shot out, gripping his arm. No, Alex, you can't just walk away. They'll come after us, and you won't always be here to protect him. Her eyes flicked to Jacob, then back to Alexander, filled with desperation. This was the only way I could keep him alive. The words stunned him. He froze, staring at her. Alive. Her voice cracked now, emotion breaking through the cold facade. They came to me, Alex, months ago. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd take Jacob. Ryan, he made a deal. I thought if I agreed, Jacob would be spared, that he'd be safe as long as it was controlled. Alexander's chest tightened, his pulse pounding in his ears. The room spun with the weight of her confession. She hadn't just chosen greed. She had chosen survival. Wrong, twisted survival, but survival nonetheless. Ryan laughed weakly, his voice cutting through like a blade. Don't listen to her sob story. She liked it. The money. The control. She's as much a part of this as I am. Shut up. Elena snapped, her voice shaking with fury as she turned on him. For the first time, her mask cracked fully. Tears streamed down her face. You dragged us into this. Alexander looked between them, his heart splitting apart. Who was telling the truth? Was Elena a victim of coercion, or had she embraced the system willingly? Jacob whimpered again, his voice muffled but clear this time. Dad, let's go home. The words cut through everything. The lies, the rage, the betrayal. Alexander's grip tightened on his son. We're going home, he said firmly. But as he started for the stairs, Ryan's voice followed, soft and menacing. You think home still exists? You'll see soon enough. They're already coming. At that exact moment, headlights flared outside the basement's tiny window. Engines rumbled, growing louder. Doors slammed shut. Heavy footsteps crunched across the gravel driveway. Alexander froze. His instinct screamed. This wasn't the police. Elena's face drained of color. It's them, she whispered. Ryan's smirk widened, blood staining his teeth. Told you. The doorknob at the top of the basement stairs rattled violently. A voice barked from above, deep, commanding, unfamiliar. Open the door. Now. Alexander's blood ran cold. He shifted Jacob tighter into his arms, raising his pistol toward the stairs. His mind raced. He had fought wars overseas, but this war had followed him home. The basement door began to splinter under the pounding. Jacob buried his face against his father's chest, trembling. And Alexander knew the nightmare was only beginning. The pounding on the basement door grew louder, each thud rattling the wooden frame. Dust rained from the ceiling with every strike. Jacob clung tighter to Alexander, his small fingers digging into his father's uniform as though letting go meant death. Open it, the voice roared again from above, deeper this time, edged with menace. Alexander's instincts sharpened, honed by years of combat. This wasn't law enforcement. These men weren't here to protect. They were here to claim. Ryan coughed out a laugh from the floor, blood still dripping from his lip. Told you, brother. You can't stop it. They don't wait. They take what's theirs. Alexander snapped his pistol toward him. Shut your mouth. But his brother only grinned wider. The basement door shuddered under another blow, the wood beginning to crack. Alexander scanned the room quickly, mind racing. One way out, the stairs. No windows big enough to fit through. No other escape. He looked down at Jacob, whose tear-filled eyes pleaded with him. The boy was shaking so violently Alexander feared he might faint. Listen to me, buddy, Alexander whispered, crouching so they were eye level. No matter what happens, I won't let them take you. Do you hear me? Jacob nodded weakly, though his sobs still shook his chest. Elena moved closer, her hands trembling as she reached toward them. Alex, please let me talk to them. I can calm this down. Alexander turned on her, his glare sharp as a blade. Talk to them? You invited them into our lives. Her lips parted, guilt flashing across her face. I thought it was the only way to keep him alive. The door cracked, splinters falling to the floor. The footsteps above shifted, more of them now, heavy and deliberate. Alexander's pulse thundered. Time was gone. He shoved Jacob gently into the corner behind an overturned workbench. Stay down. Don't move until I say. Jacob's wide eyes locked on him. Dad, I'll come back for you, Alexander whispered, his voice breaking. He brushed his son's hair back, kissed his forehead, and then rose, pistol raised toward the stairs. The door finally gave way. It crashed inward, slamming against the wall with a splintering crack. 3 men stormed down the steps. Black jackets, masks covering their faces, boots pounding against the wood. Their movements were precise, coordinated. Not common thugs. Trained. The first one spotted Alexander immediately, raising a shotgun. Drop it, he barked. But Alexander didn't drop. He fired first. The crack of his pistol echoed through the basement, the bullet slamming into the man's shoulder. He tumbled down the stairs, weapon clattering across the floor. The second man lunged forward, swinging a crowbar. Alexander pivoted, catching his arm and slamming his elbow into the attacker's ribs. The man grunted, but before Alexander could finish him, the third charged with a knife, blade glinting under the basement's single light. Alexander ducked, twisting, the knife slicing across his sleeve. He countered with a brutal strike, his pistols but crashing against the man's jaw. The attacker staggered back, blood spraying from his mouth. Ryan whooped from the corner, manic delight in his eyes. This is the show. This is what they paid for. Shut up. Alexander roared, fury surging. The second man recovered, swinging the crowbar again. This time, it connected, smashing against Alexander's shoulder. Pain exploded through him, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to go down. He fired again, the bullet tearing into the man's leg. The attacker crumpled, howling in pain. Elena screamed, pressing herself against the wall. Stop! You'll make it worse. Alexander ignored her, his chest heaving as adrenaline surged. He turned his pistol back toward the final attacker, who was staggering but still upright. Back off, Alexander growled. But the man only grinned beneath his mask. He's marked, he rasped, his voice chilling. The boy belongs to us now. Rage exploded in Alexander's veins. He surged forward, tackling the man to the ground. The pistol fired once more, point blank. The body went limp beneath him. For a moment, the basement fell silent again, broken only by Jacob's soft sobs from the corner. Alexander rose slowly, his body aching, his breath ragged. 3 men down, but more could be outside. He had no idea how many. He rushed back to Jacob, pulling the boy in his arms once more. We're leaving, he said, his voice a mix of command and desperation. But before he could climb the stairs, Ryan's voice slithered out from the corner, hoarse but gloating. Run if you want, Alex. But it won't matter. They've already seen everything. Your son's face. Your wife's betrayal. You fighting them. It's all saved. And you can't erase it. Alexander froze mid-step, his chest tightening. Because deep down, he knew Ryan was right. Even if he escaped this house, the nightmare wouldn't end here. It was bigger, darker, global. And Jacob was already caught in its grip. Alexander tightened his hold on his son and climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting against an enemy that existed in shadows, one that had already marked his family. At the top of the stairs, he glanced back at Elena, who stood frozen, tears streaking her face. You wanted them in our lives, he said coldly. Now you'll face them. Her lips quivered, but she didn't move. Alexander shoved the basement door closed behind him, locking it as best as he could. He pressed Jacob against his chest, heart pounding. The war he thought he left overseas was now inside his home, and it was far from over. The house above the basement was unnervingly silent, as though holding its breath after the storm of violence below. Alexander pressed Jacob close to his chest, scanning the living room with sharp, battle-honed eyes. His heart still thundered from the fight, his arm throbbing where the crowbar had struck. Jacob's small fingers clung desperately to his father's collar. Dad, are they gone? He whispered, his voice raw from the gag. Alexander bent slightly, kissing his son's hair. Not yet, buddy, but I'll get us out. His tone was steady, but his chest burned with fear. He had learned long ago that children didn't need the truth, they needed certainty. He crossed to the window, carefully peeling back the curtain. Outside, The driveway glowed beneath the harsh beams of headlights. Two black SUVs sat parked, engines humming like predators waiting to pounce. Shadows moved, more men pacing, guarding. Alexander's jaw clenched. There were too many to fight head-on. From the basement below, Ryan's muffled laughter drifted upward, echoing through the floorboards. "Run, brother, run. Let's see how far you get." Alexander's grip on Jacob tightened. He wanted to storm back down there, silence Ryan once and for all. But every second spent in this house brought them closer to being trapped. "Stay quiet," he whispered to Jacob, gently setting him on his feet. He crouched low, scanning for weapons. His pistol was half spent. He'd need something more. He grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, tucking it into his belt. The front door rattled suddenly, someone testing the lock. Alexander pulled Jacob into the shadows by the staircase. Boots scraped against the porch. A man's voice called out, calm but chilling, "Captain Ward, we know you're inside. Hand over the boy, and no one else gets hurt." Jacob's body trembled violently. Alexander covered his son's mouth gently, whispering into his ear, "Don't make a sound." The door rattled again, harder this time. Alexander's pulse hammered. He needed a way out, fast. His eyes flicked to the back of the house. The kitchen door. Beyond it, the yard and woods. If they could reach cover, he might have a chance. He scooped Jacob back into his arms, moving silently toward the kitchen. Every creak of the floor felt like thunder beneath his boots. The doorknob at the front snapped. The lock gave way with a splintering crack. Voices flooded in low, commanding, coordinated. "Move in. Find them." Alexander slipped into the kitchen just as heavy boots stomped into the living room. Shadows stretched across the walls, long and menacing. He reached the back door, praying it wouldn't betray him with a squeal. He turned the knob slowly. The hinge groaned softly. Then Jacob gasped, "Dad!" Too late. A masked man appeared at the back porch, a rifle raised. His eyes locked on them instantly. Alexander reacted in a blur. He twisted sideways, the rifle's muzzle flashing as bullets tore through the wall. He tackled the man with full force, slamming him against the doorframe. The gun clattered away. With one swift motion, Alexander drove the kitchen knife upward, burying it into the attacker's side. The man collapsed, choking, blood spilling across the threshold. "Dad!" Jacob cried, his small voice cracking. Alexander yanked the knife free, scooped Jacob into his arms again, and bolted through the door into the night air. The woods stretched behind the house, shadows twisting between the trees. The cold bit at his lungs as he ran, Jacob's heartbeat pounding against his chest. Behind them, shouts erupted from the house. Flashlights flared, beams slicing through the darkness. "Go! He's out back!" Bullets snapped through the air, chewing bark off nearby trees. Alexander zigzagged, his muscles screaming, his grip iron-tight on Jacob. He had carried wounded brothers across battlefields before, but this was different. This was his son, his only son. He darted behind a thick oak, chest heaving. Jacob sobbed softly, muffling his face against Alexander's shoulder. "I'm scared, Dad." Alexander pressed his cheek to the boy's hair. "I know, but I need you to be brave. Just a little longer." The shouts drew closer, flashlights cutting through the woods. Alexander peered through the branches, counting. 6 men. At least 6. Too many to take head-on, not with Jacob in his arms. Then he heard it, the low hum of an engine. Not from the SUVs. From deeper in the woods. Headlights glowed faintly through the trees, moving closer. His stomach dropped. Reinforcements. Elena's words echoed in his mind. They're powerful. They'll come for him. Alexander's pulse thundered. The net was tightening. His son was already marked. He crouched lower, whispering to Jacob, "We'll get through this. I swear it." But as the new headlights drew nearer, one truth became painfully clear. He wasn't just fighting to escape the house anymore. He was fighting a network, an unseen machine of predators and profiteers who had already claimed his son as their own. And they weren't going to stop until they had him. The forest swallowed Alexander and Jacob, but the night wasn't on their side. The moon cut through the branches, spotlighting them in patches as they ran. Behind them, Flashlights danced and voices barked orders, the hunters closing in. Jacob clung to his father's neck, his breath sharp and fast. "Dad, I can't. I can't." Alexander shifted him higher in his arms, his muscles burning from the weight. "Yes, you can. Just hold on. I've got you." His voice was steady, but his lungs burned and his shoulder throbbed from the crowbar's earlier strike. The low hum of the engine they'd heard earlier grew louder. Tires crunched over dead leaves. Headlights cut through the trees ahead, sweeping side to side like search beams. Alexander ducked behind a fallen log, pressing Jacob flat against the ground. He whispered firmly, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." The headlights passed briefly, then slowed. A black SUV rolled to a stop not 20 yards away. Its doors opened in sync, and two men stepped out, both carrying rifles. Their movements were crisp, professional. "They're here," one muttered, his voice low but carrying in the still night. The boys close. Spread out. Alexander's stomach clenched. His son wasn't just a target. He was a prize. Jacob's small body trembled against him. Alexander placed a hand on the boy's chest, feeling the frantic pounding of his heart. "You're safe with me," he whispered, though every instinct screamed otherwise. The two men split, one heading left, the other right. Behind them, the voices of the others in the woods grew closer, the circle tightening. Alexander scanned the terrain. The forest stretched endlessly, but somewhere beyond was the old creek that ran toward the train tracks. If he could reach it, he could mask their trail. But getting there meant moving fast and loud. He weighed the risk in a heartbeat. Staying meant capture. Moving meant exposure. He chose movement. Lifting Jacob back into his arms, he bolted from behind the log, sprinting low across the clearing. Branches whipped against his face, the ground uneven under his boots. "Contact!" a voice shouted. Gunfire erupted, bullets snapping through the trees. Bark exploded beside them. Alexander ducked and zigzagged, adrenaline drowning the pain in his shoulder. Jacob buried his face into his father's neck, muffling his sobs. "Don't let them take me." "Never," Alexander hissed, his grip iron tight. Ahead, he spotted the faint glimmer of moonlight on water. The creek. He pushed harder, his legs screaming as bullets chewed into the dirt at his heels. He leapt down the small embankment, splashing into the freezing water. The current bit at his legs, dragging at his boots, but it was cover. It would wash away their tracks. He waded deeper, the water soaking his uniform, Jacob clinging tighter as cold seeped into his bones. He crouched low, using the reeds for concealment. Above the embankment, flashlights swept the ground. One of the men shouted, "They're heading toward the creek." Another replied, "Hold position. Reinforcements are closing in." Alexander's jaw tightened. Reinforcements. More were coming. He forced himself forward, moving with the current, every step a battle against the rushing water. Jacob shivered violently in his arms, teeth chattering. "D-Dad, I know, buddy. Hold on. We're almost there." The creek bent sharply ahead, disappearing in a thicker woods. He pushed toward it, chest heaving, pistol still clutched in one hand. Every sound behind him told him time was running out. Then, voices ahead. Men, already waiting. Alexander froze, heart pounding. They were being funneled. The chase wasn't random. It was coordinated. These men weren't just chasing. They were hurting him. He ducked low, pressing Jacob against the muddy bank, whispering urgently, "Quiet." Through the reeds, he saw them. Two figures crouched near the creek's bend, rifles ready, scanning the water. One raised a radio. "Target moving down the channel. He'll be in sight in less than a minute." Alexander's pulse thundered. He was outnumbered, exhausted, carrying his son, and running out of time. But surrender wasn't an option. He looked at Jacob, who stared back with tear-streaked cheeks and terrified eyes. "I need you to trust me," Alexander whispered. "No matter what happens, don't let go of me." Jacob nodded, trembling but resolute. Alexander adjusted his grip, braced himself, and then pushed forward, straight into the bend. The two men spun, rifles snapping up. But Alexander fired first, his pistol barking twice. One man dropped instantly, the other staggered with a scream. Alexander surged forward, tackling the wounded man into the creek, slamming his head beneath the icy water until the body went limp. Gunfire exploded behind them. The others had caught up. Bullets tore through the reeds, splashing into the water. Alexander scooped Jacob up again, sprinting toward the far bank. His lungs screamed, his muscles burned, but he didn't stop. He scaled the embankment, dragging Jacob with him, collapsing behind a fallen tree. The woods lit up with flashlight beams. Voices shouted, closer now than ever. Jacob's small voice trembled in his ear. Dad, what if we can't get away? Alexander pressed his forehead against his son's, his voice fierce and steady. We will, because I will never stop fighting for you. But as the beams cut through the darkness, surrounding them, Alexander knew the truth. Escape was slipping through his fingers, and the men chasing them weren't going to stop until Jacob was gone. The forest no longer felt like cover. It felt like a cage. Flashlight beams slashed through the darkness, weaving closer with each second. The men hunting Alexander and Jacob weren't rushing blindly. They were moving with precision, tightening their circle. Every sound, the crack of a branch, the crunch of leaves, told Alexander just how close they were. Jacob huddled against him behind the fallen tree, his small chest heaving, his breath sharp with fear. Dad, they're everywhere, he whispered, barely audible. Alexander's hand pressed gently against his son's back. I know, but they won't take you. Do you hear me? Not while I'm breathing. His words were steady, but his eyes scanned frantically, calculating. The creek behind them glistened faintly in the moonlight, now littered with ripples from gunfire. Ahead, flashlights bobbed, cutting off the path. To the left, faint voices barked orders. To the right, headlights flared through the trees. More reinforcements, SUVs crawling slowly, boxing them in. Ryan's voice seemed to echo from memory, cruel and mocking. He's already theirs. Alexander shoved the thought away. He couldn't let Jacob see him falter. He crouched lower, whispering, We're going to move, buddy. Stay as quiet as you can. When I say run, you run with me. Don't look back. Jacob nodded, tears streaking his face, his eyes wide with terrified trust. Alexander drew a steadying breath, checked his pistol. Only 2 bullets left. He grimaced. He'd have to make them count. A shout rang out. Over here. Movement. Flashlights whipped in their direction. Alexander grabbed Jacob's hand, pulling him to his feet. Run. They bolted from behind the log, sprinting through the trees. Bullets cracked through the night, dirt spraying at their heels. Jacob stumbled once, but Alexander scooped him back up without slowing, muscles screaming with the effort. The forest thinned ahead. Through the gaps in the trees, Alexander saw it. The faint outline of railroad tracks glinting under the moon. A train horn wailed in the distance. Hope surged in his chest. If they could reach it, maybe they could ride the noise, mask their escape. But the enemy was faster. Figures emerged from a tree line ahead, rifles raised. Alexander skidded to a stop, shielding Jacob with his body. The circle was complete. Men closed in from all sides, flashlights blinding, voices sharp. Captain Ward, one of them barked. His mask covered his face, but his voice carried authority. Put the boy down. Walk away, and you live. Resist, and you both die. Jacob whimpered, burying his face against Alexander's chest. Alexander's jaw clenched, his mind racing. He couldn't fight them all. Not with 2 bullets, not with Jacob in his arms. His eyes flicked to the left. A ravine cut through the ground, steep but climbable. Beyond it, the tracks glimmered faintly. Risky, but it was their only chance. He whispered into Jacob's hair. Hold on tight. Without warning, Alexander fired both shots in quick succession, not aiming to kill, but to blind. Flashlights shattered in sparks, plunging part of the clearing into darkness. Move! He barked, sprinting toward the ravine. Shouts erupted, bullets whizzing past. He reached the edge and leapt, sliding down the muddy incline with Jacob clutched against him. Rocks tore at his arms, dirt filled his mouth, but he didn't stop. They hit the bottom hard. Pain shot up Alexander's leg, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself upright. Jacob whimpered, his arms wrapped tight around his father's neck. Above them, flashlights appeared at the ravine's edge. Voices shouted orders. Cut him off. Don't let him reach the tracks. Alexander staggered forward, dragging himself through the mud. His lungs screamed, his body battered, but adrenaline drove him on. The rumble of the train grew louder, closer, the ground vibrating beneath their feet. The ravine walls funneled them toward the tracks. Ahead, the trees broke open, revealing the steel lines gleaming in the moonlight. The horn wailed again, closer now. Alexander climbed the last incline, boots slipping on wet earth, but somehow he dragged himself and Jacob to the top. The tracks lay just yards away, the faint beam of the approaching train's headlight cutting through the night. Then, movement. 2 men burst from the trees ahead, blocking the path. Their rifles glinted, barrels trained directly at Alexander. Jacob cried out, his voice high and broken. Dad! Alexander froze, chest heaving, eyes darting between the rifles and the train. Behind him, more voices closed in. Above him, flashlights poured over the ravine. Ahead, death waited on 2 barrels. He had no bullets, no backup, just his son's life in his arms. For the first time since the nightmare began, Alexander felt the crushing weight of inevitability. He whispered, almost to himself, I won't let them take you. And then he made his choice. He sprinted straight toward the train. The ground shook beneath Alexander's boots as the train thundered closer, its headlight blazing through the trees like a second sun. The metallic screech of wheels on steel filled the night, drowning out the shouts of the men behind him. Jacob clung desperately to his father's neck, sobbing. Dad, no. Please. Alexander's lungs burned, every muscle screaming as he sprinted toward the tracks. 2 gunmen blocked the path ahead, their rifles raised. For a heartbeat, time slowed, their fingers tightening on the triggers, the train's horn wailing, Jacob's cries slicing through the chaos. Alexander veered sharply, diving into the gravel shoulder as the rifles barked. Bullets ripped the air where he had just been, sparks flying off the steel rails. He rolled, shielding Jacob with his body, then exploded upward again, charging directly at the closest attacker. The man swung his rifle down, but Alexander slammed into him with bone-crushing force. They tumbled into the dirt, the rifle skittering away. Alexander didn't hesitate. He drove his elbow into the man's jaw, once, twice, until the body went limp. The second gunman pivoted, aiming at Alexander's exposed back. Jacob screamed. Alexander spun, snatching up the fallen rifle. He fired from the hip, the recoil jarring his battered shoulder. The shot hit the man square in the chest, dropping him instantly. For a brief, fleeting moment, there was silence except for the roar of the train bearing down. But then voices erupted from the woods behind. Dozens of them. Flashlights flared, beams sweeping across the clearing. Reinforcements. The circle was closing again. Alexander's chest heaved, his body trembling. He looked down at Jacob, whose tear-streaked face glistened in the train's blinding light. We're not stopping here, Alexander whispered, his voice raw. He sprinted the final few yards, leaping onto the tracks just as the locomotive screamed past. The wind slammed into him like a wall, the force nearly ripping Jacob from his arms. He dropped low, crouching near the wheels, heart hammering. Bullets cracked against the steel cars, sparks flying. The men were firing blindly through the blur of motion. Alexander spotted his chance, an open ladder welded to the side of a freight car. Gritting his teeth, he shifted Jacob higher in his arms. Hold on tight. Don't let go. With a surge of strength he didn't know he had left, Alexander grabbed the ladder, hauling himself up as the train thundered forward. His boots scraped against the steel, slipping once before finding purchase. He hooked his arm through the rung, clutching Jacob close with the other. The wind roared, the world a blur of speed and noise. Below, flashlights darted helplessly as the ground whipped past. Shouts echoed, frustrated and furious, but the train carried them away, faster and faster, until the forest swallowed the voices whole. For the first time that night, the gunfire ceased. Alexander clung to the ladder, chest heaving, Jacob sobbing into his shoulder. His body ached, his vision swam, but relief coursed through him. They had escaped, at least for now. He climbed carefully onto the narrow ledge of the freight car, crouching low to shield Jacob from the wind. The boy's small frame shivered violently, exhaustion and cold seeping in. Alexander pulled him close, whispering, "You're safe. I promise you're safe." But deep down, he knew the promise was fragile. Ryan's words echoed like poison in his ears. "There are backups. Multiple servers. Even if you kill me, it's already out there. The live stream, the faces, the screams. Everything was saved. And whoever those men worked for, they wouldn't stop. Not now. Not ever." Jacob stirred weakly, his voice broken. "Dad, are we going home?" Alexander pressed his lips against his son's hair, his chest tightening. "Yes," he said softly. "I'll get you home." But as the train roared into the night, carrying them deeper into the unknown, Alexander's mind churned with a brutal truth. Home no longer meant safety. Home was gone. And somewhere, hidden behind screens and money, powerful men had already marked Jacob as theirs. The war wasn't over. It had only shifted battlefields. And this time, the enemy was faceless. Everywhere. Alexander held his son tighter, eyes locked on the endless rails ahead. "They want to fight?" he whispered, voice low and lethal. "Then they'll get one." The train thundered onward, carrying father and son into the darkness, while behind them, an invisible empire prepared its next move. The train thundered through the night, its wheels screeching against the rails, sparks flashing in the darkness. Alexander crouched low on the narrow ledge of the freight car, one arm looped through the steel ladder, the other holding Jacob close against his chest. The boy was trembling violently, his face pressed into his father's uniform. Exhaustion and cold weighed heavily on him, but his grip never loosened. "Dad," Jacob's voice cracked, barely a whisper. "Where are we going?" Alexander pressed his lips to his son's damp hair. "Somewhere safe," he murmured, though the words burned on his tongue. Safe was an illusion. As long as the network existed, safety was temporary. The train clattered over a bridge, the wind howling through the beams. Below them, the black water of a river rushed by. For a moment, Alexander let his eyes close, forcing his breath steady. He had survived firefights, ambushes, and missions that had broken better men. But this was different. This wasn't about orders or country. This was about blood. His blood. And someone wanted it. Jacob shifted weakly in his arms. Why did Mom let them do it? The question cut deeper than any wound. Alexander's chest tightened, grief and rage twisting inside him. He wanted to tell Jacob it was a mistake, that his mother had been tricked. But lying wouldn't erase what the boy had already seen. He whispered, "Sometimes people make choices that hurt the ones they love. But you have me, and I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Jacob nodded faintly, his small body relaxing slightly against him. Within minutes, exhaustion pulled him into uneasy sleep. Alexander stared into the darkness rushing past. His mind replayed every detail, the cameras, the chat messages, Elena's words. "I thought maybe Jacob would be safe if we controlled it." Safe? His wife had traded their son's innocence for survival, or worse, for greed. A memory surfaced, sharp and cruel. Elena months ago, standing at the kitchen counter, scrolling her phone, brushing off his questions about new clothes and sudden expenses. "Don't worry about it," she had said, smiling too tightly. He had believed her. Now, the truth was clear. She had been preparing, building this horror behind his back. The train slowed as it approached a yard, the metal grind of brakes screaming into the night. Alexander's muscles tensed. Staying on too long meant risk. Workers, cameras, maybe even allies of the men who had chased them. He shook Jacob gently. "Buddy, wake up. We have to move." The boy stirred, groggy and pale, but his small arms instinctively tightened around his father's neck. "I'm tired." "I know. Just a little longer." Alexander climbed down the ladder, boots hitting the gravel beside the tracks as the train slowed to a crawl. He crouched low, scanning the yard. Rows of rusted freight cars stretched into the shadows. The faint glow of security lights dotted the perimeter. In the distance, a barking dog echoed, a warning of human presence nearby. Alexander slipped between the cars, keeping Jacob pressed close. Every shadow felt like an ambush. Every sound made his pulse hammer. He needed shelter. Time to regroup. Time to think. Finally, he found it. An abandoned maintenance shed, its windows cracked, its door hanging half open. He slipped inside, the air stale with dust and oil. He set Jacob on a pile of old blankets in the corner. The boy curled up instantly, exhaustion overtaking fear. Alexander crouched beside him, brushing damp hair from his forehead. Rest. I'll keep watch. But rest wouldn't come for Alexander. His mind raced. Ryan's words haunted him. Multiple servers. Backups. Even if you kill me, it's already out there. Destroying one phone hadn't erased the footage. The live stream had spread like poison across the web. Anonymous viewers had paid to watch, and those recordings were their currency. He clenched his fists. This wasn't just about rescuing Jacob. This was about cutting out the root, exposing the network. And he knew where to start. Elena. She had been the bridge between Ryan and the faceless men. She knew names, accounts, contacts. Even if she hadn't wanted to admit it, she was the key. Alexander's jaw tightened as he stared at the cracked floorboards. His wife had betrayed him in the most unforgivable way. But she was still the only lead he had left. He pulled out his phone, its battery clinging to life. Dozens of missed calls and texts blinked on the screen. Military contacts, family friends, unknown numbers. But one stood out. A message from an unlisted sender, time-stamped just minutes before he boarded the train. We want the boy. Stop running. Alexander's blood ran cold. They weren't just following. They were watching. His grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. He lifted his gaze, staring into the shadows of the shed. For the first time that night, the soldier in him settled. Focused. If they wanted a war, they had chosen the wrong man. The maintenance shed was silent except for the faint drip of water from a rusted pipe. Alexander sat in the corner, pistol balanced on his knee, eyes fixed on the door. His son lay curled on the pile of blankets beside him, finally asleep, his face pale but peaceful. For hours, Alexander had replayed every detail in his mind. The cameras, the masked men, Elena's words, the message on his phone, we want the boy. Stop running. He knew what had to be done. When the first light of dawn bled through the cracked windows, he rose, tucking the pistol into his waistband. He brushed Jacob's hair gently, whispering, "Stay here. I'll be back." Jacob stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Dad, don't leave me." Alexander's chest tightened. He crouched, taking his son's small hands in his own. "I'll never leave you. Not for good. But I have to stop this, Jacob. If I don't, they'll keep coming." Tears welled in the boy's eyes, but he nodded weakly. Trust. Pure, fragile trust. Alexander kissed his forehead, then slipped into the gray morning. The house was still standing, though its windows were shattered and the front door hung broken from the night's chaos. Police tape crisscrossed the porch, fluttering in the breeze. But Alexander didn't stop at the porch. He walked straight to the police cruiser parked at the curb, where Elena sat in the back seat, her wrists cuffed. Her hair was tangled, her eyes red, but her expression carried no shame, only defiance. When she saw him, her lips twisted. "You should have stayed gone, Alex. You were never meant to come back." The officer standing nearby shifted uneasily, but Alexander raised a hand. "Give us a minute." The cop hesitated, then stepped away. Alexander leaned down, his eyes locking on hers through the glass. "Tell me everything. Now." Elena's jaw tightened. "You won't understand." His voice sharpened, steel in every syllable. "Try me." For the first time, her mask cracked. Her shoulders sagged, her eyes darting away. It wasn't supposed to go that far. Ryan made the deal, not me. But when they came to the house, when they threatened to take Jacob if I didn't play along, she swallowed hard. I thought if I managed it, controlled it, I could keep him alive. Alexander's chest heaved. "So you stood there. You let them tie up our son. You let them hurt him. And you watched." Her lips trembled. "You don't know what they would have done if I refused. They're not just criminals, Alex. They're connected. Judges, bankers, military men. The kind of people you can't touch." Alexander's stomach churned. This wasn't just a dark corner of the internet. It was a machine fueled by power and money, protected from above. He leaned closer, his voice low and lethal. Then I'll burn it down piece by piece. Elena's eyes widened, fear flickering for the first time. You can't fight them. They'll kill you. Alexander straightened, his jaw tight. Maybe, but I'd rather die fighting than watch my son suffer one more second. Hours later, Alexander stood outside the safe house where Jacob waited, guarded now by officers he trusted. The boy ran into his arms the moment he returned, burying his face into his chest. You came back, Jacob whispered. Alexander kissed the top of his head, his voice firm but gentle. Always. But behind the reunion, Alexander's mind was already at war. He had seen the truth. The network wasn't just his brother's twisted scheme. It was a chain of power stretching far beyond one basement. And though Ryan sat in a cell and Elena faced charges, Alexander knew this was only the first battle. The war had followed him home. But this time, it wasn't for his country. It was for his son. He looked down at Jacob, holding him tighter, a vow hardening in his chest. They'll never touch you again. Not while I breathe. The boy clung to him, trusting completely. And as the sun broke over the horizon, Alexander's path was clear. The soldier who had once fought for orders now fought for blood, for family, for the only thing that mattered. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time since he walked into that basement, Alexander believed they had a chance. Because he wasn't ordinary. He was a father. And fathers don't surrender.